Hey, Chris, did you like what I did there?
I love it. That is a great intro. Thank you so much. You're really killing it. We're getting better every month. I really like it.
I knew you. I just knew that it was gonna like. I knew you were gonna be
Oh,
like,
and
wait a minute,
that
this
was
is different.
fantastic. Yeah, we need to use that in our promos.
Yes, yes. So I was just really excited to
Yeah,
launch that. I created that, and I just wanted to see how
thank
that was going to
you.
unfold. So that was super cool.
Impressive.
But welcome everyone. It is 4 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Finding your HR advocacy voice. Just in case you missed it, hopefully you did not. We do have a disclaimer, right? Because we just want to make sure that you understand that we're doing this for opportunities. Didn't want to share that one. Hold on. Well, you know what? I probably don't have it
That's
up here,
okay.
but I already shared it. You can
Yeah,
definitely pause
you
it
made the
and read
disclosure.
that. But we are here to just create a space where you can talk about these policies, right? I think, Chris, you've also found this too, that people aren't always so so eager to talk about these type of things because they think it's divisive
No.
and everyone
Yes.
wants to run away from politics. What have you seen when it comes to
Oh,
topics
well,
like this?
especially right now. I mean, right now is just like an especially tough time because we have a lot going on, to say the least. There are a lot
Yes.
of moving parts. Most people are not well versed on the Constitution, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they know it exists. I think they're familiar with, a handful of the amendments, like the first and the second and things like that. But by and large, a real good example is we've seen President Trump in it's hard to believe it's only been 10 days and it feels like it's
Really,
only
only
been
10 days? It does, yeah, it does
the,
not feel.
the pace is something to behold, to be certain, but nonetheless,
Yes.
um, we've been seeing a lot of executive action being taken, right?
Yes.
And I think the pace at which he's doing it and the impact of those decisions
Mm-hmm.
is far greater than presidents in the past. As a matter of fact, most presidents walk right into office and completely undo, pretty much every executive action the prior person had. President Trump walks in, annihilates most of President Obama's and does some of his own. Then Joe Biden comes in, wipes out all of President Trump's and reinstalls about half of President Obama's plus his own.
Yeah.
And normally this happens and nobody really notices, right, per se. It's more of an inside Washington kind of thing. That's where
Mm-hmm.
people really notice it and where the impact is felt. But the average person really is not sitting there waiting for the nightly news to figure out what executive order has come out today. That's not been average experience, right, for
That's
most
right. That's right.
people in the United States. And so that has really changed. And so not a whole lot of understanding of the reach of the authority of the executive, and where does the executive have privilege to act on their own and without Congress, and where is it constrained? And then you have on top of that, I have heard more than a few folks on the Democrat side. What you're really hearing a lot, I heard it today more than anything, is that these actions are unconstitutional. Now, I never hear a statement of support of because of this, and this. It kind of stops right there. It's
It's
unconstitutional.
and
Yeah.
that's true because I think it
Yeah.
does cause a lot of confusion when you hear that.
Right. And so I will say these two things are true. From my perception, most of what he's been doing has been within the confines of the executive authority granted in the Constitution, right?
Okay.
Is he pressing the edges of that? For sure. For
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it can get complex, right? Because
Okay.
this is not certain. And now you're into the judiciary, right? Remember, because the judiciary is the check on these things on the constitutional side. This is now you're bumping into the separation of powers, right? And so it is the role of judiciary to determine if an argument comes forward, right? Is this within the confines of the duties of the executive or not, right? And so there have been a couple of injunctions filed against the president, primarily involving the actions he's taking with the federal workforce.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So can he actually lay these folks off? Can he fire them? There was an extension. He offered 8 months pay severance, right, for anybody that wanted to leave. And a judge stepped in and said, no, you got to give him another 30 days to consider that. You can't just say you have 2 weeks, right? So you see that kind of thing come in. So he didn't say you can't do it. He just said you didn't give him enough time, right? So
and I know that we said that we were going to start with the state and then kind of go to the
but I want to talk about why this is hard to talk about, right? Because everything I just said, I can guarantee you there are people who would stand here and go bonkers over any of that, right? And when you are in a situation where people are going from 0 to 11 almost instantly on something like that, it's very hard to parse it out, right? So you and I are having a civil discussion about this, and I'm just kind of articulating what I see from my perspective.
Yes.
And where some of the conflict points may be. And I'm being dispassionate about it because, as you and I've talked about many times, if you're going to be an effective advocate, you cannot wear a jersey. You cannot pick up one team or the other's jersey, put it on, and say, I'm on team red, I'm on team blue, or whatever the heck it is. You can't do that because you have to have votes.
Yes.
And you need it from both sides. And so, but what I'm also saying is that you have to be able to understand, if you're going to effectively advocate, you have to understand the landscape you're operating in.
Yes.
And where, for lack of a better term, where the landmines might be, so you don't step on them. But this is kind of a microcosm. Certainly what's going on at the federal level is bananas in comparison to what's going on in the state, even though the state has going on. So yeah, I'd like to hand this over to you. And if you could.
Well, even before we even do that, I guess the question, because before I even forget this question,
yes,
I guess because when we think about the federal government being the largest employer in the United States, is what
if you count the military, I think that's probably right.
Oh, okay, because they count the military. Okay, so I guess like I think about like, just how that even my mind started thinking about when you started talking about the federal government, like what is that going to do to the workforce in the United States, right? Because we think about the AI retirement.
I think it's a good point in this sense, right? So I don't know if you saw it, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out with their adjusted adjusted Q3 numbers for third quarter last year. And what they've been able to determine is for like the last 18 months, the only real growth in the job market at all has been at the federal government level.
Has only been federal government is growth? Wow.
Yeah, the only real new jobs created were at the federal government level.
What?
Yes. Yeah. And so this is where your question looms large, because if that was the category propping up the jobs market last year, what are the implications to not only turning off that tap, but putting it in reverse? Yeah. And this is also an interesting point of view, or an interesting dilemma, because you got to remember the federal workforce is largely concentrated in a couple of counties in Maryland and a couple of counties in Virginia. So if a lot of those people lose their jobs, it's like an economic bomb going off in like 4 counties.
Wow. Okay, so it's going to be concentrated.
It isn't like there are federal workers in other cities and other states. There are, but the bulk of
that's where the bulk of
it's concentrated in the District of Columbia. And
Okay.
that workforce, you got to remember, I lived and worked in DC for 21 years. So the bulk of that workforce is really concentrated in 2 or 3 counties in Maryland and 2 or 3 counties in Virginia, and then 1 county in West Virginia.
Oh, wow. So it's really, it's not really spread out across the countries, but that's going to be a major impact in that
There,
area.
there.
Yeah, in terms of the skill sets that, if it does happen and they are, and they are finally, I mean, I guess released, then that means whatever skill sets they have is going to impact the workforce. And so
Well, so it depends, right? If they have
okay,
really transferable skills and really transferable competencies, it could be a real shot in the arm to companies in the area who've been trying to hire and just
hire and looking for that skill.
yeah.
Yes. So
So that could happen in some percentage you would expect would be absorbed, right? You can
yes.
certainly expect that.
Okay.
But yeah, that would be certainly an economic shock, in those 5-6 counties for sure.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I guess I was just really curious about that. And as you were talking about
Yeah.
that, I thought, okay, let me ask that question. Let's say it out loud. Okay. So what we've been doing then, we've been looking at the local level, just to
Right.
look at the policies, bills that are being introduced, and seeing how that could impact Hoosiers here, right?
Right.
And what so. Maybe see, do I want to start here? So this is just, I guess, to share my thought process, and then Chris, you can also, well, let me
Sure.
take off this banner.
Yeah.
Let's take this banner off here.
There
Okay,
you go.
share the thought process. So we know, like at SHRM has the 6 core policy areas that they focus on when they're looking at policies being created, policies that are being introduced. Ooh, let me do it here. So then we know there's workforce workplace governance, there's workforce development, workplace inclusion, workplace flexibility and leave, workplace healthcare, workplace immigration, and we did say the workplace governance. And so
Right.
these are how I kind of put it in different buckets. And so this is and the workplace governance, I kind of related that to your HR toolkit. The toolkit concept. We know
Uh-huh.
how to govern the workplace when it comes to HR. We know the
Right.
tools and the processes and procedures that that we have at our fingertips. That we definitely want to make sure that we're engaged in those conversations when elected officials
Yep.
want to encroach upon that, right?
Yep.
So the one of the bills, the first bills that we were looking at from the House bills was 1284, asked for the background checks to be required for maintenance workers. Now, and then, I'm not going to share the rest of the other thing unless, you feel like it's pertinent to the conversation as far as like it's a partisan bill. Well, maybe I should say this, that the reason why I have this, just so that I don't leave it to for people to figure out why I put that there. When we think about advocacy and an opportunity to think about, how you can get involved, I think it's good to understand who the authors of the bill. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be bipartisan when it comes to a vote. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Normally in Indiana, most bills that pass the House, that pass the Senate, are remarkably bipartisan.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just the
This
authorship.
just refers to your definition here is the author, and you're determining whether or not they have any co-sponsors from the other party.
Yes.
That's in essence what you're determining here. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so just in case, if you're, because we always talk about policy, not politics, if this is something that you're looking at and maybe this might help you, feel a little bit more comfortable getting engaged, and this is an opportunity for you to understand, who's authoring the bill, and then maybe, reaching out, and if that's, if you live within that area, you can also reach out and connect and find out, what do they like about the bill? What do they not like about the bill, from both sides? And so that's why I put that there to cause, plant a seed for conversation.
Yeah, and it's a starting point. And you bring up a
Yes.
good point when it comes to the a Republican, just to be blunt, right? A Republican author of a bill is usually coming at the issue from a certain point of view.
Yes.
And oftentimes that will not be the same point of view that a Democrat might have on the very same issue.
Yes.
No, but if we're going to be effective advocates, we have to know the starting point. We have the person in front of you and their point of view. If you're going to try to persuade them, you have to have an understanding of why they're in that spot to begin with.
Yes. And I love that. I love honestly, like that's why I love when we have these conversations, Chris, because that's exactly it. having that opportunity to honestly just to challenge your own mindsets too, and just to for a chance try to follow follow the way that someone else thinks. Okay, but House Bill 1284. So we looked at this bill, Chris, and we said that this is we questioned that we want to track this bill because it looks like as if there's another requirement or mandate that's being put on the HR professional.
That's basically well, it's really interesting in that it's the way the bill is drawn. It would apply pretty much only to landlords who operate like apartment buildings, condos, and things like that. So it wouldn't apply to every employer. So it's a super targeted bill, but it's extraordinarily onerous because that bill would require a nationwide criminal background check only for people in maintenance roles. And so it's not even all your employees, right? It would only be in these maintenance roles. So super targeted, super specific. But our opposition to that would be on the basis of it's an employer mandate, and a nationwide search, criminal background search, just massively costly, time consuming, and everything like that. And so this is a real overkill bill. Now, I am confident, 100% confident, that this bill is driven by something that happened. And so looking at it being targeted at maintenance employees only.
Yes.
Given the fact that maintenance employees have keys to every
apartment
and stuff like rooms,
that.
Just reading into this, what I think is likely it happened, something untoward happened. It turned out the person ended up having a criminal record, but not in this state. would be my guess. And a lot of the HR pros who do background checks know that in the United States, the criminal records that we would have access to on a background search are kept at the county level. Right. We would love to be able to go to the FBI national database and just do the whole country and be done with it. But that's illegal. We don't have access to that. Right. That's carefully guarded by the FBI. That's restricted to law enforcement. And so the private companies don't have access to that. And so, think about it this way. Even if the law said, well, you just have to check every county in Indiana, well, that would still be 92 distinct searches, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's just, and the cost involved because the cost of charge for this, right? Now, the way this bill is designed,
the cost does go to the applicant.
It would actually require the state police to do the background check because
has
access to the federal database. But it's unclear to me at all that that's even appropriate to put the state police in that bind where they actually have to work for a private employer to give them access to a federal database they otherwise wouldn't have access to. I'm not even sure you can encumber law enforcement that way, right? And put them at the behest of a private entity.
And then you think about the property tax, here going on, and the property tax conversation going on here in the state of Indiana as a whole.
Well, that got altered seriously today. I don't know if you heard about that.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The property tax bill got really watered down.
Oh, it did.
Watered down. Yeah. So it is not going to meet the expectations of the governor.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't catch that today.
We'll see whether or not that happens. But yes, that property tax bill has been sucking all the oxygen out.
Yes.
Out of the assembly. And,
yes.
And of course, that was signal legislation for the governor, right? I mean, he ran on that, and that was a centerpiece to his campaign. So, but people will notice that bill isn't on here because HR doesn't do property tax.
Exactly.
But it's affecting the session. I mean, one of the things you'll notice on all these, if you look at the column where it says status,
yes,
and you see where Tracy's got it here, and you notice it says first reading, no committee hearing, first reading, no committee hearing. Well, we hit the midpoint of the session in 8 days, right?
Yes, next week will be the
Yeah.
final.
So if these bills haven't
definitely.
got a hearing yet, the likelihood that they get a hearing at all next week is probably very low.
Yes, and
Right.
and for and I didn't update, but when we get to that, I think the prior authorization is moving rather
Yeah,
moving right along.
prior authorization is going to go.
Yeah. And
Is
so
going to
then the
go.
next bill that we were looking at was HB 1300 prohibits with certain exceptions an employer from relying on the wage history of an applicant in the
Right.
hiring process and
Right.
determining wages.
Yep.
And so, so I think that, I feel like that's part of practice, right? I feel like, a lot of organizations are becoming more transparent, but
Well, what this the, my opposite, the opposite, when you and I talked about this bill,
mhm,
my opposition to it was, quite frankly, the way it was drafted. I mean, this thing would have needed a lot of work, quite frankly, for it to be palatable to us. But the way that it was written, it could be interpreted as it would bar the employer from asking any questions about the person's wage history at all. And I don't know about you, but I've done a lot of recruiting in my
mhm,
career. And one of the first things you do in recruiting when you're calling somebody is, if you're not in the ballpark and on compensation and the package, it's probably not worth the discussion, right?
mhm.
And if you're not even close, that the person will talk, and so from a recruiting standpoint, it's a lot like sales, right? You got the mantra, get to know fast.
Yes,
Get to the
yes,
know
yes. You want to
fast.
get to the know
And
fast, which,
so one of the
yes.
things I used to say was, I didn't really ask questions about the person's past history. What I said was, what are your expectations, and what is the line you won't go beyond? Well, what is just the, nothing else you could put on the table, benefits, opportunities, whatever the heck it is, the monetary package comes out lower than this, I'm not interested. And I used to want to get to that real fast. Well,
Mhm.
but that could also lead to a discussion, and it frankly did, because a lot of comp, as you know, can come down to mechanics. How much of the mix is salary, and how much of it is opportunity, and how much of that opportunity is within that person's control, and is it real, or is it based on the end of the year, and was it tied to company overall profit margin that, yes, you can have some influence over, but in the micro, no, you can't, right? And so I would need to know details as to how your package was built in order to do a fair comparison to my own. And the way this bill is written, I can't even have that discussion, because that gets into their wage history.
Okay.
Well, how can I do my job? Because I can't if I can't understand and make it relational to the candidate, here's how our package is built. Here's what you didn't like about yours. Here's how ours is different. Well, I can't do the compare and contrast without the compare part.
Hmm.
See what I mean?
Yes, yes. So
And
the
so
way that it's
to
written,
me, that's just
makes it.
basic recruiting technique,
Mhm.
right? And the way this bill was drawn, I'm pretty sure I couldn't even have that conversation without violating it. So that's what the what people are objective. I think what people object to is, it used to be, you don't see this anymore. To your point, Tracy, you said HR practices have changed a lot around this, but I remember 20 years ago, when to apply for a job, you had to send them your salary history, like for the last 10 years. Like, who did you work for?
Wow. Okay.
Give me a report, like showing all of that. And they said,
Wow.
you
Okay.
don't provide that, we don't consider you.
Golly.
But
Okay.
nobody's done that for like a decade. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not a practice anymore. And yet people act like it is. So,
Unless
but
some areas might be still doing that, maybe, or
yeah,
is
this is a bill. I was pretty confident it would not get a hearing.
that it really wouldn't move
Right.
anywhere.
Well,
Mhm.
Dave Van Adder is the chair of that committee, and he's never heard a bill like that. I don't know why he would, but I'm just saying that this is the kind of thing. If you and I thought it was going to move, if that got a hearing, we would testify and say, okay, these are the things that have to change. This
Okay.
draft is unacceptable, right? You can't practically make this work in the workplace. It's going to blow us up. So this is how it needs to change. You change it like this, that we can work within that. You don't, we're in opposition. And I've
Okay.
testified many times just in that fashion. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's very helpful. That is very, very helpful.
But this one didn't get a hearing, and I don't think it's going to get a hearing.
Well, this one that provides that an employer may require an immunization only if the employer
Yeah.
respects the
So
employee's right to refuse that immunization.
yeah. So I think that this really goes back to COVID, and I think that given the huge fight that they had over the COVID vaccinations in the General Assembly, and I testified on that bill because they already did it. They did a bill related to COVID immunizations back when, we were in COVID. And I testified on that bill because its original iteration was just a mess, and they changed it enough so that it wasn't going to cause trouble for us. But that's exactly what this is tied to. This is somebody still angry about.
Well, because I guess because that was going to be the question. Like, well, where is this stemming from now?
Well,
at this
see,
point?
here's the thing, though. That was such a divisive. Everybody felt wrung out by that COVID immunization policy for employers. And as you can imagine, that was a highly charged hearing, lots of anger around that and all that. And I don't think the Republican caucus has any appetite to relive that. and that's why I think that
You want to put provisions in
they're
place
just not
to
going to
make
open this can of worms.
Okay. So it makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, so then, HB 1625, because I want to definitely make sure that we
Yeah.
talk about the federal level
Yeah.
as well. So prohibits an individual person or other entity from entering into a non-compete agreement
Yes.
after June 30th of 2025. Now this is big. So
Yeah. So this bill mirrors in at least the spirit and some of the language mirrors legislation that we saw in DC last year, right? There were two bills, one in the Senate, one in the House. They mirrored each other. We've talked about mirrored bills in prior episodes of this.
yes.
Podcast. But
And what's the reason for that, real quick? Why do they do that?
why do they mirror the bills?
Yeah, why do they mirror bills?
So that they can get if there are amendments or if something has to change in one place or the other, you know it while that's happening. And so if there's a difference between the Senate bill and the House bill that gets passed, they go to what's called conference committee to try to sort that out. And it makes it a lot easier to do that if the language is identical in both bills.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and if both bills pass and as a matter of fact, if both bills pass and there's no amendments, there's nothing else like that going on, then usually what happens is whichever house passes it first, they will then move to pass that bill out of its original house of origin in theirs too, and just get it done. So that's another clean way to do it.
Both.
Because you and I both know, the committee schedule isn't infinite, right? There's only so much time you have to meet, and only so many bills can come up for hearing. And so the reason you do the mirrors is so that if one moves faster than the other, you can still get your stuff done.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
okay,
it does.
cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this bill, and for the record, Governor Braun, back when he was Senator Braun, was in favor of this, right? So, but it's not moving. You can see it's not moving. Now, let me tell you what this bill is really about. So this is actually about last year. So we have seen that there are a number of bills pointed at the hospitals, very clearly.
Yes.
But not bills we're tracking. But there are at least three hospital-related bills that are Republican priority bills in both the House and the Senate. Right. We don't have a dog in the hospital fight, so
but it helps us kind of get a better picture of what's going on.
right. But those are priority bills, and those are going to go. So the first iteration of those. So these actions are being taken because what happened last year. So last year, the legislature did these shots across the bow to try to get the hospitals to get in line and cut their costs. And that shot across the bow was a non-compete, was a bill eliminating non-compete. It would only apply just to hospitals, but for all their doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And hospitals fought it tooth and nail and got it done with some interesting parliamentary maneuvers in the
Okay.
employment, pensions, and labor. I think I watched that hearing. It was surreal. I'd never seen anything like that happen in my life. But nonetheless, they kind of changed water into wine in the middle of the hearing. And the hospital, the blunt fact is the Indiana Hospital Association is a very powerful lobby, and they were successful in getting the bill watered down so it only applied to family practice doctors, which are the fewest doctors in the hospital systems and the ones that cost the least, right? So
Okay.
the bill passed,
Okay.
but it didn't have the impact that the original authors wanted, what they were looking for. And needless
Okay.
to say, they were very angry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this year they came back and said, okay, we'll just write a bill that applies to every employer, and now the hospitals have to eat it. So while this
Okay.
bill, while it looks a lot like the federal legislation, and while it is indeed pointed at all employers, make no mistake about it, that you're getting this bill because of what happened last year, and the real target is the hospitals. But as an
Mm-hmm.
indiscriminate target, it would hit us all. And that's why I recommended opposition for this bill, because again, this is an employer mandate bill.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
right. So, HB 1647 is paid leave for mental health entities and entity. Oh no, entitles an employee to at least 36 hours of paid mental health leave per calendar year. So
Yes.
this is a mandate.
This is a mandate.
Yes.
This is another one we wouldn't support. This is a new one this year. I haven't really seen that one specifically carving out mental health. So that's new this year. But this is very common this year in legislatures across the country. And related, and I've seen a couple of bills like this. There's a bill in the New York. In the New York General Assembly, there is a bill, and it looks like it might pass, that would require employers to provide bereavement leave to employees whose pets had died.
Okay.
So,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So, I've seen that legislation in California. I've seen that legislation in Colorado. I mean, that's a coming thing. And it makes sense to me, New York, it makes sense to me, California, because the one thing that New York City and San Francisco both have in common is that they have more pets than children in the city.
Okay. Okay.
So when you
Makes
think
sense.
about
Makes
it,
sense.
right? Yeah. So when you think about it, this is one of the reasons why so many companies now offer pet insurance.
Because
there are
there's a
more
lot
pets
more
than
people.
kids. Yeah. So and basically the pets become kind of almost like fictive children, right? I mean, people love their pets. I'm not, and by the way, I'm not casting aspersion here.
No, definitely.
I'm
But I mean, it makes
I'm
sense.
describing,
It
right?
makes sense. Yeah.
And so I'm just saying it might sound bizarre on its face, but there's a logic to it, right? That goes. But yes, this is the first that I've seen where it carves out mental health, right?
Okay.
But employer mandate, and you'll notice it's not got a hearing. It's not going to get a hearing. Yeah.
Okay. So the next one, 1654, legalizes the sale and use of cannabis by a person at least 18 years of age.
Yeah.
And we're looking at this as how it can impact the workforce.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because I've talked at length about this, but the challenge, the real concern I have is that we have so many categories of work where there's a statutory requirement, a federal requirement, something that requires the employer to drug test. And they're absolutely going to test for marijuana, typically because the federal government classifies marijuana as a class 1 narcotic, right? That's just all there is to it. That's how they classify it. And so, if you work with children, you're going to be drug tested. You work with the elderly, you're going to be drug tested. You're involved in transportation, you're going to be drug tested. I mean, on and on and on and on and on. There are just lots of category of work where you just, they will test for this because of the risk, right? And so you pass something like this, well, It will certainly increase the number of people who take marijuana because they think it's now legal, but it would also knock them out of an opportunity to be employed in the areas in which they have to drug test. So my concern is, as long as marijuana remains a class 1 narcotic at the federal level, there are just some real practical barriers, right, to legalizing in almost any fashion, right? That it just is what it is.
Mm-hmm. At least HR definitely would have to be a part of the would want to be a part of
right
the
now. Private employers can make decisions about where they drug test or not. But if you're a government contractor, different story, right? So,
and being able to understand that and
yeah, so
and
that's
make
why
sure that
it's one of these things where, yeah, I am really, really worried, because I saw what happened in Colorado. I saw what happened in these other states, that when they legalized it people thought that it would have no impact on their job or their opportunities, and they couldn't have been more wrong. Just because your state said to do this, the state doesn't have any control over the federal. So,
yeah, and just making sure that they understand what
yes.
would that look like when it really unfolds. How would that really impact everything?
To me, it's almost an impossible needle to thread against the backdrop of the restriction set that the state has no authority to alter. That just it requires a federal solution. Yeah.
Okay. So now it looks like we're going to be getting into the Senate bill. So pharmacists, SB 96, Pharmacists Administration of Immunizations.
Yeah.
And I think we're support of this, right?
Yeah, we're in support of this because it expands the capacity. That, one of the things that any HR pro that works in a rural area, which is most of them who work in manufacturing, right? Because most factories are by definition out in the middle of nowhere, right? And coming up, there's not a whole lot of medical care capacity out in our rural counties to begin with, right? The rural counties have always struggled with adequate healthcare providers, right? Just enough of them. And so this bill basically says, hey, the pharmacists can do this immunization. And so from my perspective, as I read the bill, it just opens up that capacity. Now, this isn't limited to rural. Don't get me wrong. The bill doesn't say it only applies to rural pharmacists. That's not true. It would apply to all. But it really expands the capacity. And so if you're in a rural area and you're just really hard pressed to get into a doctor to get an immunization, if you could get one at a Walgreens, why wouldn't you? Right.
Because some jobs are held back, right? Like, some jobs they can't really move forward with the job until they have all.
Well, it's not even that. You just think about it on the healthcare side. I mean, even think about just kids, right? Kids going to go to summer camp. They have to have a tetanus shot, right? I mean, so why couldn't you get it done by the pharmacist if you could? If if the doctor can't get to you until after summer camp starts, well, that's no good for the employee, right? So in my mind, just about anything that expands healthcare access is good for HR because our employees will be more satisfied if they can get access to more service. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the logic there. Yeah.
Okay, so then SB 113 permits the use of cannabis by a person at least 21, and this is medical use.
So this bill's been offered. Oh, good Lord. I've seen that every session for probably years. Yeah, this has been opposed. The State Chamber of Commerce is against this bill too. And I helped write the policy on that chamber policy on that. But basically there is a credible substitute for marijuana that was developed on purpose. It's synthetic. It's called Marinol. And basically it has the ameliorative properties of marijuana, but it doesn't get you high. So it doesn't have any THC.
Okay.
So we believe that is well, not that we believe, but I mean the insurance companies and the doctors agree that Marinol is a reasonable substitute, And so, and the most important thing is, if you are prescribed Marinol, you will not pop a drug test, a pre-employment drug test.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So
So
there's no THC in it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So then, SB 115, paid family and medical leave program. And this requires the Department of the Workforce Development to establish
Yeah.
a paid family medical leave program.
Yep. Not going to get a hearing.
Because it'd be a mandate.
It's
This is a
bipartisan.
mandate.
You saw it was bipartisan. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And it is bipartisan for sure.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's another mandate bill. We're not going to go for that.
and so pretty much they would add an extra expense for employers here in the state of Indiana.
Well, but it would apply to all. I mean, that's the other thing. Well, I don't know. I'd have to look at the bill to see who they define as employer. But usually these bills define as employer anybody with 15 employers or more is what I typically see. But it's still a mandate bill. It's still a mandate bill because right now, this is not to say, and you and I have said this dozens of times, if an employer believes that it's the right thing to do for that company, it's consistent with their values, the company has the means, the employees would value it. If they on their own say, hey, we will have paid, FMLA, that's their prerogative to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that. This is the point. If you put people in a position to have to do this, that's the mandate, and it's everybody. And let's face it, some employers could handle this and some couldn't, but in any event, it's still a mandate.
Yes.
So no, we have strong policy pegs around workplace flexibility.
Yes.
That's not flexible.
No, exactly. I mean, because, puts an organization in a position to where, it's about, okay, so what perk am I going to take away from you so that I can.
Right. I mean, precisely. Yeah. You got to square the circle in some way. You're not going to have your labor costs dragged up. So no.
Yeah, but definitely we encourage and organizations out there, if you're able to do this, definitely do this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so SB 131 provides that if a retail establishment has a restroom facility. So this
so this one was another employer mandate one. Now this was targeted retail, and the bill is just the way it's written is just a wreck. I don't even know how a retail clerk is supposed to determine something is a medical emergency as well. I don't know about you, but if I have to go to the bathroom really bad, it's an emergency. Right. I don't know about medical, but it's absolutely an emergency. But this one, another mandate bill and forces. Yeah.
So this one requires a construction manager as contractor and a subcontractor of any tier.
Yeah, this is another mandate bill, right? Again, the requirement is to do the I-9.
Yes.
The E-Verify is voluntary. And once again, if an employer wants to use E-Verify, be my guest, right? I'm perfectly fine with that. Our opposition on this would be you're mandating.
Now, because, just trying to understand the ideology sometimes of where these things are coming from. Do you think the thought process could possibly be, it has something to do with immigration? They feel like they're going to be cracking down on illegal immigration by mandating this? Is that what? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I don't know if you heard the other day, but the Social Security Administration doesn't, and I'll preface this by saying the oldest and the creakiest technology systems that we have in the U.S. are operated by the IRS and the Social Security Administration. That may not make people feel good, but that's the truth.
Oh, wow.
And so one of the challenges that it's emerged that the Social Security has is that it doesn't have any systemic ability to stop duplicate Social Security numbers from being issued. And they've known about this problem for a while. They've tried different things to, safeguard against that. They got workarounds and stuff like that. But the bottom line is they don't have any way systemically to prevent that from.
I mean, this is just crazy.
Well, you got to remember how old the Social Security system is, right?
Yeah.
and they weren't designed to handle the volume of population that they're handling or for how long they're handling. You got to remember when the Social Security system was installed and they paid out benefits at age 65. Remember that? That was the original threshold.
Yes.
People were dying on average at 63.
Oh, wow.
So now people are living to what? Women live to, I think their average, women are now pushing, I think their average is all the way up to like 89, getting close to almost 90, and men are sitting at 82. I mean,
Okay.
and you look at how much the population has grown since 1938. I mean, the system wasn't designed for the volume that it's handling. So I'm not surprised that that's happening. I would just be really surprised if that's the only thing that's happening, right? Against the backdrop of that. And I'm not saying people sat down and deliberately did this. I want to make it very clear. But when you say things like that to folks, and the Social Security number is part of the employment verification process for most people, right? We all know when it comes to the I-9, there's a limited number of documents that are on the A list, right? A U.S. passport is on the A list. So if you have a U.S. passport, you don't have to produce any other documents. Most people don't, right? You don't usually have a passport unless you're traveling, but most people have a driver's license or a state-issued ID, and most of them have a Social Security number. And we know when it comes to the I-9, the bread and butter, right, is the license and the Social Security number. So the folks here on this bill, you're correct, are saying that when you run it through this system, you find out whether or not that's a legit number. Whereas on the I-9, if the person produces it and it looks on its face to be an authentic document, because that's our only duty in HR, right? That we make a good faith assessment that this looks like an authentic. We aren't CIA specialists who are checking the thread count on the card, right? I mean, that's what we do. We're not held to that standard. So it's a good faith assessment. The document looks authentic. And if it is, we handwrite down the number on the I-9.
Yes.
That is the same number that goes to payroll. Now, whether that's the right number or legit number or anything else is not our duty to assess. It's just in the moment at the time that looks legit, right?
Yes.
And the thing about the E-Verify is it actually goes into the Social Security system and checks.
Yes.
We don't do that when it comes to the I-9 process. We are doing a visual read of documents in front of our face. That's not this, right? That's not this. So our opposition here is the mandate part. You know, I know lots and lots of people who use the Verify system. I've had clients that have used the Verify system. I think it's a lot better than it was. It had some troubles for a long time, but I think they, by and large, got them mostly straightened out. And I wouldn't warn anybody off. I wouldn't advise anybody not to use E-Verify, but E-Verify isn't required under the law. The I-9 is, right? You can do E-Verify. You can do the Verify. Yeah. So it's the mandate part again.
Yes.
on that bill. Yeah.
All right. So then, so the SB 480, which is the prior authorization. So I looked this up real quick, and I just wanted to. Yeah. So this is getting, of course, this looks like it's really going to be going.
Yeah, it's going to go. This is large in outgrowth. You and I talked at length about this bill when we were trying to figure out the position that we would recommend. The bottom line of it is, because most doctors are employees now, they're not really calling the shots on when they perform a procedure, right? There are internal rules around that. If you're a doctor at Indiana Health, you perform a procedure when Indiana Health says you can, based on the criteria they established, right? And not before.
Yes.
This bill is a relic of the days when doctors were largely private, and they always had fights with insurance companies about what a doctor deemed necessary. And what doctors deemed necessary used to be because I frickin' said so. And the insurance
Yeah, I'm
company
a
would say,
doctor.
well, we don't think so. And the doctor would say, okay, you went to med school?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how it would be. That's not the world today. The world today is the reality of it is, and there was significant study done on this in Indiana. And we know that 99%, 98% of the pre-authorizations are just going through automatically. So why are we spinning our wheels here?
Yeah, with that.
Why are we putting this extra barrier in place? And so, yeah, we both looked at this on balance and said that this actually probably makes our employees' lives easier. And it doesn't
Honestly,
affect our
yes.
claims. It doesn't affect our. I would tell you, if I was still running medical, if I was still doing the medical stuff for an employer, and I'm looking at maybe 1% delta on the outside of that, but my employees not having to jump through one more hoop, I'd take this in a heartbeat. I'd have no problem with this. So.
Yes, I mean, it does help with,
and it doesn't need our help. We don't even have to testify in favor of this bill. This bill is going to go.
Mm-hmm. And so let's see. Okay, so SB 488 requires the Department of Workforce Development to establish a reemployment skills training. Oh, and this was, I think I was just following this, but I don't think that we were necessarily tracking.
No, I think this is one that will probably go. You and I talked at length about this too.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it was going to go because of the stature of the people who are on the bill and the fact that the chair of the committee is the lead author on the bill. So
yes.
This got passed out of committee, as you noted. And oh no, has it received a vote yet? I thought it received a vote.
488. I think it.
I think it got voted out.
Let me see. Let me check it real quick.
Sure.
I can.
Yeah, I think it got voted out, and I think it's
488. Let's see. Going to the Senate. It's going to get a hearing February 13 at 9 a.m.
Oh, it hasn't had a hearing yet.
No, so it hasn't had. So no, well, 488. It was already heard in committee, but it looks like it went to.
They haven't had a vote yet. Have they not voted it out of committee yet?
They didn't vote it out of committee yet.
Yeah, my guess is.
Well, let me make. No, it did. It did.
It did. Yeah, that was my thinking. Okay, so it got voted out. So it's
yes, it did.
Now it's up to the Senate Pro Tem to bring it to the floor for a vote.
Yes.
Be it as it may, this is going to go. This is also going to pass the House. This is going to get done. The House might change a little bit, but this one's going to go. Yeah.
Okay. Now this one, I kind of caught after the fact, so I just kind of added it to the list. But it was it's employee absence for case conference meetings. So I guess there's case conference meetings that sometimes parents aren't able to go to because they don't have the time off or the day off, and so I guess this is a policy.
Yeah, this is super specific. So it's the term case conference refers specifically to typically children who are involved with individual education
yes, IEP or some situations.
IEPs or something like that. Yeah. So this is super targeted. I was trying to think in my head of an employer where the employer would say, hey, I got to get to a case conference for my kid. And the employer would look at him and say, no. I have a hard time. I mean, I'm sure that happens, but I have a hard time seeing that in real life, but I guess that could occur, but it got a hearing.
Yes. And it's placed on, it says placed back on second reading. That happened yesterday.
Okay.
That means.
Okay. So they haven't held a second. Did they hold a vote yet?
It doesn't say. It doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. Second reading. That's going to be the vote. Second reading is going to be the vote. So it looks like they're going to. Well, okay.
Oh, amendment 1. Okay, so let's see. Amendment
1. Oh, they had amendments.
Amendment order engrossed, and then another senator added on the 6th, and then placed back on second reading on the 11th.
Who was the senator added?
Senator Randolph. Senator Yoder and Senator Randolph.
Yeah. So those are all those are Democrats. Randolph is I believe he's the senior. I believe he is the senior minority member on that committee. So that's counts for something. My guess is that maybe they bring that up for a vote then. Okay. All right.
Okay. So then if that was to happen, then I guess if HR reps would just, I mean, I guess
So
make
that
sure
one
they,
there, if that passed, because that's an employer mandate bill, that one's pretty
yes.
tough. That one's pretty tough. Ugh. We would have to see what it looks like coming out of the Senate.
Okay.
You said there was an amendment on it. I'll have to look that bill up, see what the amendment.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we've
Now,
only got about 5 minutes here.
yeah, 5 minutes. So maybe we'll because 289 is not something that, that's an HR bill, but we know that, there's a lot going
Yeah.
on from SHRM.
Yeah.
So for the 5 minutes, what direction did you want to take? What did you want to say?
Yeah. So basically, well, the reason I want to talk about this is because the broad efforts the president has signed, several executive orders around eliminating DEI and all this other stuff. And so
Yes.
this bill that you're referring for 49, the reason we're not tracking it is it is actually pointed at education. So that's not us. So we pretty much stay in our lane, right? But the reason I was tracking is because, of course, we have DEI professionals within HR, right? And so the way this bill is drawn, it could very well have impact on them at colleges and universities. I do expect this bill to pass. I absolutely expect this bill to pass, but it's pointed at curricula, right? So it's pointed at curricula. And pointed really foursquare at the high schools and the universities.
Yes, and the K through 12 too, I think as well too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they basically do not want DEI as it's currently cast. Now, you and I talked earlier before the program about SHRM's efforts, because once DEI is going to get dismantled, there's no doubt in my mind. It is absolutely going to be dismantled. But that doesn't mean, and we would say this from an HR perspective all the time, we think inclusion and trying to include as many people and being as open and transparent to as many people as possible is a good thing. We're on the record for that, right? So there are elements that were within DEI that I think are palatable and acceptable if packaged the right way, if you will. So SHRM is in the process of recasting that. And of course, they're calling it BEAM, right?
Yes.
So anybody who's watching this that is a SHRM member, you can go to the SHRM website and you can do a search for BEAM and you'll see exactly what SHRM. Oh, there you are right there.
Yes. Yeah. Just want to give a shout out to SHRM, right? Because I think that SHRM has just been really just really super cool in how they've been coming out with information to make sure that we feel empowered and equipped and be able to understand how to navigate all of this. Because of course, when it comes out,
this is super important. And quite frankly, this is exactly where HR should be taking a leadership role, right? Because when DEI goes away, something is going to emerge on the back side of that. And SHRM is trying to capture that and set the template for how to think about what that is. And I think this is really well thought out, right? I really like it.
And what does BEAM stand for? What it stands for, belonging enhanced by access through merit. Belonging enhanced by access through merit.
And so it's got, and so the belonging piece is good. The merit piece is good. So remember, the governor said he wanted MEI, right? Merit.
Yes, merit
and intelligence, right?
Excellence, innovation.
Yeah, the Silicon Valley is doing the MEI thing, right? That's right out of the valley.
Are they? So they've defined it. Silicon Valley has defined it for themselves.
Yeah. Silicon Valley dumped DEI a year and a half ago, almost 2 years. Yeah. So that's in the ashes for them. They've got this new thing, MEI. And the governor talked about that too, right?
Yes.
He wants MEI in government. So this is SHRM trying to basically be the first one to define the path forward. And I think this is right. This situation calls for HR leadership. 100%. This situation calls for HR leadership. So I applaud SHRM putting the heavy duty lift in thinking this through and articulating it. And I like it. Yeah.
Yes. And I would say like the key things that I've picked up from the beam framework is that, there really isn't. Well, I guess it really does go back to, first we have to define what you even consider DEI, right? Because I think that we even talked about this yesterday, Chris, that, sometimes when we hear people say, oh, DEI is going away, sometimes we have to think about, well, what do you mean? Because sometimes not the practices that were always in compliance, those things are not going away.
Yeah.
It's just that when there's too much of a
Yeah.
focus
So
on
you notice
identity
here,
or gender.
yeah. Well, and here you go. You notice the very first principle there. Anti-exclusion. Are the program's opportunities open to all?
Yes.
Without regard to individual sex, race, or any other protected status. I think that's pretty defensible.
Mm-hmm.
That is like core to inclusion. That's 100% core to inclusion. You can't be exclusionary, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think the way this is articulated, it deals with a lot of things that people found utterly unpalatable by the more extreme practices of DEI. You and I talked earlier that the problem with DEI is that it fell across a super wide spectrum where it got kind of thrown over everything, with some practices being extraordinarily sound and effective and very, very well managed, to what on earth are you thinking, right? So, it really covered that whole spectrum. And as always, when it comes to human beings, you will always be defined by the worst, not the best. Right. And that's where DEI was. So this is a real good opportunity for us as HR professionals, real good way for us to show leadership within organizations. Advocacy works internally also, right? So,
no, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I know we're 2 minutes past our time here.
Yes.
So in the next program, I'm hoping that we will have a Secretary of Labor that's confirmed. There hasn't even been a hearing yet for former Representative DeRaymer. So
okay.
Hopefully in the next program, I'll be able to talk a little bit more about what's going on at the federal level as it applies to HR.
Now, is there anything that's pressing that maybe, HR professionals want to know, considering all the things that have happened since last month, is there anything that, you should share?
Because the environment we're in is supercharged, and, I told you before we got on the program, right, that I'd fielded a couple calls from people who were asking me, I had one person say that they had heard that, an executive order had come out and Title VII was being set aside. And I'm like, no, that didn't happen. That can't happen. And that's a piece of legislation, right? And of course, the reason they thought that was because affirmative action had been eliminated. And I said, no, that could happen because affirmative action was created by executive order by Lyndon Baines Johnson. So he was the president, and anything a former president did can be undone by a current president. So all President Trump did was say that's out. And he could do that. And that was in his authority to do it, because that was not a piece of legislation. Right? But people are hearing a lot of stuff. And again, when you're concerned, especially when you're scared, and we all have scared people right now. We need to.
Well, for sure. I think because we don't know.
We need to be conscious of that and aware of that, sensitive to that. I concur, right? I concur that we should. But affirmative action is not synonymous with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That's, again, one was the legislation, one was an executive order. We've got a technical corrections bill in the legislature this year to put in the dustbin a precursor piece of regulation that predated the ADA by like a decade. Okay. The state took a swipe at trying to, figure out workplace accommodation. Well, then the ADA came in, and so they're finally getting around to cleaning up, right? I mean, they do that, right? They try to get rid of law that's obsolete or things like that. And that was just a technical corrections bill. You and I don't pay really a lot of attention to technical corrections bills because they don't get hearings.
Because it really isn't. Yeah, there's
just lawyers
testimony or
talking to
anything.
lawyers, right? I mean, that's all it is. But somebody had caught that, and the nature of the communication I had was, does this mean Indiana is now going to do away with the ADA? Is this just the first step to do?
Oh, goodness. Okay.
I was like, again, no, a piece of federal legislation that's a federal supremacy law applies to every employer with 15 employees, period. That can't go away. Congress can make it go away, but the president can't make it go away. And the state legislature can't make it go away. So I think right now, everybody's just really agitated and concerned and scared and worried and utterly unsure about what's going on. And the pace and the rate of the change we're going through is so significant that people feel like, I can't keep up. I know we're doing this program once a month. I can tell you right now, if we were doing this every week, we still couldn't keep up.
Because it's just so much. But what I do, like, I want to commend the people that have been reaching out to you. I think that that's what's so key right now is that, not to run with being upset when you hear something. I think
and I'm glad they called.
We don't know,
because I'll provide clarity, right?
That's right, because we need clarity, and I think sometimes we got to feel safe enough to share some of these thoughts that we're having. Say it out loud. Say it in front of somebody that you trust. I would say
to anybody.
But not to anybody, but somebody you trust. But
if it's a piece of legislation that's been passed that can't be done by the president. But the president, if you want to look at the authorities that the president has under the Constitution, just as a matter of fact, I have on my phone, I carry the Constitution on my phone so I can easily reference it.
Well, where could people find that or get it?
You can get it off, go to the Google Play Store and download a Constitution app, and there you go. It's actually a fairly short document. The amendments are all the long documents, but you want to look for the powers of the executive in Article 3 of the Constitution is where.
Article 3 of the
Constitution articulates the duties of the executive. Yeah, duties and responsibilities of the executive.
Because I heard a joke the other day. I don't know if you'll find it funny, but I just thought it was just really funny the way she said it, and then we'll end up on that note. But she said that she was like, we're always talking about make America healthy again, MAHA. She said we're always
Make
America great again.
I've heard about that. Yeah,
and then she said make America great again, MAGA. She was like, well, what about make America follow the Constitution again? And she said it's MAFCA.
I had not heard that one.
So
I had not heard that one. Yeah,
but it's like MAFCA. Yeah.
So,
but
hear some of these injunctions that have been filed against the president's actions will receive hearings. So, and some of these will go to appellate courts. I could easily see the Supremes just stepping in. Right, especially since they have to do, since these are questions involving executive authority, the court might say, "Hey, listen, we're going to seize up the whole government if we don't get this settled right now, one way or the other." So I could easily see a Supreme Court saying, "Yeah, we can't take 2 years to sort this out. This has got to be
let's deal with this."
So so we're gonna get some decisions. So we'll see. We'll see.
All right. So let's see. I didn't get my things ready, but I know that we went over a little bit, but that's okay. I think I just wanted to make sure that we did touch on the federal as well, and and then we'll touch back next month for sure.
Next month.
So until then, have a great and beautiful day, everyone, and definitely ask questions, get engaged, get plugged in, and advocate. All right.
Great. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.